What is the machloket? Ravina Mechayev, says the Gemara, and Rav Achabar Rav Patar. Okay, that was the example where we finished yesterday. Ravina, so the Gemara wants to pick up on that issue and clarify for us. Ravina Mechayev, says Rav Mechayev, right? Patar Ravina Mechayev Kal V'chomer. He bases it on the following Kal V'chomer afatiori argument. Whereas we have a murderer, okay, where the halacha does not necessarily make a difference between shelo asabo shogeg kimazid, where there is a clear distinction, okay, in the halacha in terms of punishment, whether the act of murder was committed unintentionally or was, okay, shelo asabo shogeg kimazid, that it didn't make an inadvertent act parallel to an intentional act, okay? Va'ones kiratzon, nor did it make an act done that was by an accident, like one that was done willfully. Chayav bo hamitzamtzem. There, in that case, we say that the confiner is still liable. Now we go to our new Amud Ayin Zion 77A1, if you're using Art Scroll. Okay, what happens? Nisakin, regarding damages, Sha'asabahen Shogeg Kamezid, where there is a parallel between damages that are done inadvertently versus those done with intent. Va'ones kiratzon, and that if it was done by an accident, okay, it is parallel to intention. What happens? Eino din shechayav bahen et hamitzamtzem. Is it not logical, like kal v'chomer there, that one should find liable the person who does this confining? Okay, so what happens here now? Okay, so the Gemara is going to pick up Rav Achabar Rav Poter, but we saw the flip side of this argument, namely that Rav Achabar Rav said the person was exempt, right? Amar Rav Masharshia, he says, "My tama da'avuha da'aba poter." What is the reason that my grandfather here says the person is exempt? Amar Kra, he bases it on a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Mot yamut hamaker ritzeach hu." Okay, double lashon there. Okay, here indeed the person should die. The murderer he is. Birotzeach, he argues, with regards to the murderer, who dechayev lan mitzamtzem. In that case, indeed we find guilty or liable the one who confined. B'nizkin, but in regards to damages, lo chayav lan mitzamtzem. There we do not find the person that confined, okay, in this case. Well, whatever animal it was, right? Well, that's why he says it's liable, okay? In other words, okay? In other words, that's why he challenges the issue. Amar Rava, says Rava is going to give a slightly different explanation, okay? And he's going to give another case, okay, that, okay, because what we're talking about is the issue that Michael brought up yesterday, okay, and we did not emphasize it. Is it a direct act of the individual, or is it the result of causation that came about afterwards? Okay, so that's the part of the issue. Ted, what's the problem? Okay. So so in other words, certainly if you held the person down in the water and drowned them, that's one thing. If the person was being held down, okay, and then you let them up, or they pushed you off and they got up, okay, and stumbled away, and then shortly thereafter died, okay, can you say that the person's behavior was the direct result that caused their death? Okay? Or it was what we use the term grama, okay? Ultimate later causation. Okay? Okay, so having pointed that out, I'm going to suggest, okay, Rava is going to use this issue as the basis for his question. Okay? What does Rava tell us now? Kifato. Let's say he bound up the person. He tied them up. Okay? And as a result, umeit bara'av. And the person died from starvation. Okay? Patur. He says the person would then be likewise exempt. Okay? Take another example. Va'amar Rava, says Rava again. Kfato. Okay? Bachama. He tied him up, he bound him out in the sun. Okay? Umeit. And the person died from sunstroke, let's say. B'tzin'ah. Okay? Or he died from the cold, from exposure to the cold. Umeit and died. Chayav. Then the person, according to Rava, would be guilty. So naturally, what's our question going to be? Why doesn't Rava say in one place the person would be exempt, and in this case, the Rava says the person is guilty? After all, it would appear, hold on, Rebecca, it would appear, okay, that couldn't we say that both of them are an example of grama, okay, and that therefore, why should you make that distinction? Now your question. Grama means ultimate causation, okay, indirectly. That's why I emphasize we're talking about where the person directly caused. Okay? All right, Chayav. So what happens, says the Gemara, continuing, now that we understand the problem we have with Rava's statements, Sof Chama Levo. Ultimately, the sun is going to come out, okay? And the sun will do its own thing, so to speak, okay? Sof Tzina Levo. Ultimately, it could be that the cold is going to come, okay? So can you say that it was the person by tying up the individual that's what caused the death? Or is it more a situation that, okay, there was, it got things rolling? Yes, Michael. Right. Okay, that could be the difference, right? Not necessarily. Yeah, that's what the Gemara is suggesting as a rationale, right? That's what it's saying as an attempt to explain the difference that Rava has. Okay? On the one hand, the person is tied up, okay, during a time when all the aspects of bringing the death into formal, okay, versus not the case. However, what happens? Va'amar Rava. Let's take another example. This is Rava. Okay, that answer that the Gemara gives us may work out in making a distinction between the person dying, okay, uh, in the grama issue, okay? However, what about the following examples? Va'amar Rava kfato lifnei ari. He tied him up in front of a lion, and the lion devoured the guy. Patur, he would be exempt. Lifnei yitushin, or say he tied him up before gnats. That was the Art Scroll translation. Okay, and the gnats would be biting him. Okay, so here again, we're saying chayav. Why, in this case, do we say, after all, here's a parallel where the individual is tied up. Ultimately, he gets attacked by some kind of a creature, okay, and dies. All right, isn't that a parallel to say they both should have the same final decision, the same status of liability or exemption? Rav Ashi now comes forward and suggests the following. Amar, he says, yes.
Escape from the lions if it wasn't tied up either. It's the same thing. Here
What?
it says if boat 8 says if he wasn't, basically the same
Okay,
thing.
so you see, look at line note 4 before. Make a note by that, okay, with regards to tying up. And here the question we're going to see is, again, are all the components that are going to bring about the death at the same time, or is that not the case? Art Scroll wants to suggest, by the way, that in the example of the gnats, we're going to see the Gemara tells us they'll come and they'll go, and then another group comes. Okay?
Here says the victim could have fended off the gnats
Had he not been tied up.
hence the one who tied him is guilty of murder.
Right, so that's the case. All right? Okay. But the problem is the Gemara doesn't tell it then.
Yeah.
Okay? So it must mean either he or one of the other Meforshim give that argument. Either way, okay? We've already pointed that out, that there could be a difference earlier in the Mishnah between intent and okay, but why would you tie somebody up, okay, if you didn't have intent in mind? Okay, why would you bound somebody? So what happens? Rav Ashi Amar, he says, Rav Ashi, afilu lifnei hushin, nami patur. He disagrees. He says, even in regards before the, I'll call it the second group of gnats came in and bit the guy to death, right, would be exempt. Hani asle hani atu. Some come and some go. That's his point, that it's similar to the case of the hot and cold, okay? And therefore, in this situation, okay, not all the components are the same. All right, what happens? Itmar. About this, the following was said in terms of another example, okay? Kafa alav gigit. He took a barrel and stuck it over the person. They tied up the person, stuck the barrel over his head, and the person suffocated. Okay? Upara alav ma'aziva. Or let's say he tied up the person and he made a hole in the plaster of the house. Okay? And therefore the person died from exposure. Okay? Rabbi Zera, again a machloket. Chad amar chayav, one says the person is liable, v'chad amar patur, and one says the person is exempt. Okay, by opening the hole in the roof's plaster, the person was sleeping, again, and he dies from exposure. All right, the point is, again, I want to just re-emphasize the fact, okay, that the Mefarshim are reading things into the Gemara to help us better understand whether it's Rashi, whether it's Meiri, or others, okay? Or whether it's from the Agadita of Maharsha, okay? So the Gemara now continues, to Stayim, one might conclude, you might conclude, the Rabba Huda Amap Patur, that maybe it was Rabba in this case who would say, notice the Gemara, it says Rabba and Rabbi Zera, but it doesn't tell us who said which. Okay, at this point. And therefore it only says one says he's liable, one says he's exempt. You might conclude, coming back now, okay, that it's Rabba who said the person is exempt. Why? The Amar Rava, because Rava says earlier, Fato umet b'rav, if the person was bound up and died from hunger, patur, the person would be exempt, arguing that if they weren't bound, they would be able to lift the barrel off of themselves and therefore survive. Okay? Adrabah, says the Gemara, no, just the opposite. No, you should conclude that it may be that it's Rabbi Zera who said that the person who committed the act is exempt. Why? The Amar Rabbi Zera, because Rabbi Zera tells us, Haiman the Aile Lechavre, the Beta de Shashisha. He's going to tell us a little story here where we see that a certain person brought a second person into a house that was totally enclosed, or a room totally enclosed with marble. Okay? So there are no windows, no door, totally enclosed. So what happened? Va'adlik le shraga, and he lit a lamp inside the room. What's going to happen once you light the lamp? Okay? It's going to exhaust any air that's there in the room. Okay? Umate, the person dies, chayav. Okay? In this case, they would be liable. Tama, the adlik le shraga. What was the reason? Liable because he lit the lamp. In other words, it removed any possible oxygen, okay, that was there in the room. Lo adlik le, had he not lit the lamp, the adlik le shraga lamp, lo, the person would not have died. There would have been oxygen there. Well, that's case two. Maybe he wouldn't have died either. Okay? But even if he died, okay, it was because there was oxygen there. Okay, it's still possible the person might have survived and only died later. Which again gives us further clarification. Okay, that again the issue of a direct act, number one. And number two, if there's some I want to say space, some time difference between the act and the death, again, that's more an issue of grama and not an issue of direct act. Okay? Why? Because we're going to see elsewhere in the Gemara the same concept is raised in a number of times. Okay? Amai, I say, hatam below shraga, lo matchil chevla. Okay? The Gemara's answer is there we can say that in that case, were it not that the lamp had been lit, okay, you would not have had foul air forming inside of the marble room or marble house, and the person maybe could have at least survived. And therefore, we go over to the top of the Numa Amud, Bisha'ate, okay, and therefore here in that time, okay, that's the case. At the time of the lighting of the lamp. Again, direct acts. Hacha, but here, okay, in the case of the barrel, below shraga, nami matchil hevla b'sha'ate. Okay, in that case, again, we're making a parallel to that, all right, that the situation was such that it would be direct cause to the death. Now we get a little mnemonic device, siman, that tells us that we have a memory device, sulam, regarding a ladder, taryas, regarding a shield, simamim, which means herbs, but here we're going to explain it as medicines, okay, bakotel, and a wall. Okay, when we get to the fourth example, we're going to see what kind of sports they played in the time of Chazal. Okay, Koren, by the way, if you're using Koren with the English commentary, it actually has a picture of a stadium at the time of Chazal. Okay, anyway, that's just a side note. Amar Rava, says Rava. Let's say the following: Dachafu labor v'sulam babor. Somebody pushed, okay, another person into a pit. At the time, there was a ladder there in the pit. Uba acher v'silko, and another individual came and removed the ladder. Ve'afilu hu, and even if he, namely the one who pushed, kadam v'silko, okay, he removed the ladder first and then pushed the person into the, okay? No, why does it say kadam v'silko? Yeah, we'll get to that. Patur, he would exempt. Okay, you'd be exempt. Okay, why? The ba'ina de shadaya, because at the time that he threw him, yachol alotu, that he would be able to get up. So that part of the Gemara then tells us, no, he pushed the person while the ladder was still there and then pulled it out. Okay? That's why we got to take the Gemara step by step. Okay? Va'amar Rava. And says Rava here, let's take another example. Zarak chetz v'taris biyado. He threw an arrow or a spear or something, but the person had a shield in his hand. Uba achar v'natlo, and someone else came and removed the shield. Okay? Va'afilu hu kadam v'natlo. And even if the individual, making now a parallel, okay, what happened? Removed, right? Okay, even if he threw the spear or the arrow, then removed the shield, okay, from the one, all right? Okay, for not low, patur, the person would be exempt. Why? The ba'idna de shadaye bay. Why? Because at the time that he threw or shot the arrow, mifsak piske gire, it would be possible to have stopped the arrow. Okay? Third example, va'amar rava. Let's take this case with the simonim, the medicines, the herbs, says Rava. Zarak bo chetz. Okay, again, shot him with an arrow or threw in a spear. V'saminim biyado. And he had herbs which were a medicinal variety that he could have been able to heal himself from the wound. Uba acher upizran. And somebody came and took scattered the herbs, right? Avafilu hu kadem upizran. Or even if the one who shot the arrow or threw the spear did it and then removed the herbs or the medicines, right? Patur, they would be exempt. Why? The be'idna de shadabe, because at the time that he shot or threw the item, yachol lehitrapot hayahava, it would be possible for him to cure himself. Again, we keep seeing again the fact that there is this question of direct or indirect. Okay? Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Hilkach. In this case, he says, therefore, afilu simanin bashuk. You might derive that even if the person did not have the herbs, the medicine on him, but it was available to him from the marketplace, right? Amarle, says Rav Acha, the Rei de Rava, the Rav Ashi, challenging Rav Ashi here. And note, if you have Art Scroll, make a note by number 12. Okay? Nizdamnu lo smanim mahu. What happens if all of a sudden it became available to him, these medicines? Okay, somehow. Afterwards, right? Amarle, Rav Ashi responds, Hare yatsami beit din zakai. Namely, the person who committed the act has already come out of the court acquitted, okay, and therefore you cannot change that decree, that result.
Seeing as long as CVS is open, you get away with murder?
Not quite. Okay? Make a note by number 14, by the way, if you're using art schools. Okay. Va'amar Rava. And Rava now says furthermore, okay, now we're going to get ultimately to the story of ball playing. Okay? Now, I want us to understand, okay, that they're going to try to make a parallel in this example. Okay? Varama Rava, says Rava as follows. Zarak tzror b'kotel. If I throw tzror usually means a pebble, okay? But let's say a small rock, okay, of some kind, against a wall. V'chazra la'achorei v'harga. And the pebble bounces, the rock bounces off, ricochets off the wall and hits somebody and strikes them okay, and kills them. Chayav, okay, says Rava. They are liable. V'tanatuna, says the Gemara. We've already learned this from another example. And here we go in a little ball playing. Kegon elu hamisachakim b'kadur. Note number 14 in Art Scroll. Okay, where they had apparently an activity, like they had a rather heavy ball, and by the force you would throw it down against the wall. It would bounce off the wall, particularly depending upon how close somebody was to the wall. If the ball hit them, okay, it could cause major damage or death. If they were further away from the wall, okay, it might only cause a wound. Right? That's the image we're supposed to have as we continue now. Okay, that they played this ball. Shahargu b'mezid nehagin. That when it was done, and here, Rebecca, is your question, when it was done with intent, okay, the person would be killed, okay? In other words, the one who threw the ball, okay, would get a death penalty. B'shogeg, if it was done by accident, golin, they would be given a different penalty, namely exile, okay? They would have to leave town, okay, and go elsewhere. So the Gemara responds, B'shogeg golin, you're saying that if it was done accidentally, okay, that the person would be exiled? Pshita, isn't that obvious? B'mezid, if it was done with intent, Nahagin, it's tarichle, that they would receive a death penalty, okay? That's why it was necessary to spell it out and teach it. Mahu detema. So what are you trying to tell us then? Hatra'at safeki, isn't that an uncertain warning? Asks the Gemara. Mi amar dahadra. Who is going to say that the ball is going to ricochet and come back, or the stone is going to ricochet and come back? It's always based on the force, kocho shel adam, the force of the person doing the throwing. Okay? So the Gemara spells us, kamashmalan, comes to teach us, no, that there is this case that we assume such a thing as ricochet does occur. And therefore it's a valid hasra. Tani Rabbi Tachlifa. So Rabbi Tachlifa bar Ma'arava, Rabbi Tachlifa who came from Eretz Yisrael, from the west, Kame de Rabbi Abahu, and he teaches the following before Rabbi Abahu. Kagon elu hamisachakim bekadur shahargo, like those who play this ball game and killed. Toch arba amot, if there's somebody standing within Dalit Amos of the wall, patur. Why? Because you're stupid standing there when they're doing this with this ball. You're that close. You're putting your life in danger. Chutz la'arba, but somebody who's standing more than 4 amos away from the wall, okay, happens, all right, chayav, all right, then the person would, because it was the force of the throw and the ricochet that hit the person and get killed. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ashi, and so Ravina says to Rav Ashi here, okay, and the following, Hey Chidami, what's the situation here? In other words, oh, idekat nechale, okay? And if it was the fact that he was present there, afilu purta, even maybe less distance. Nami, then also, idelo nechale, if it wasn't with that kind of essence, right? Afilu tuva nami lo, then maybe even if they're farther away, no. Okay, so the question then of the short distance, all right, would be part of it. Okay, and the idea that force of the one who created the objects traveling, okay, could very well be, okay, you could have a greater rebound then by the amount of force. Yes, Ted. Yes. We're not, don't think of it as a tennis ball, Ted. Okay? Think of it, think about something like the size of a soccer ball, okay, or a football or something like basketball. We don't know. It could be, you know what? The game, that's why I said Art Scroll's note is that the game was played so that basically I throw the ball against the wall. You're playing against me. Okay? So what is your goal? Your goal is to catch or grab the ball as it ricochets either off the wall or it bounces and grabs it, grab the ball, and then throw the ball at me to hit me with the ball, and I'm tagged either out or you're tagged, you get a point or something like that. Okay? All right? Yeah. Okay? Okay? All right? So that, I think that's why it's important to see Art Scroll's note there. Okay? Again, I'm assuming one of either the Mefarshim indicate that.
Probably also the ball is not inflated like we have balls today. The ball is probably solid, so it was.
It could be. Or it could be something. Right. Okay, we saw, remember that there was a previous discussion in the Gemara when they asked the question about whether the ball, okay, that has stuffed with cotton or something is tameh. So in other words, so your point is well taken, Alan, that the ball certainly was of a heavier site. Okay, good, thank you. Afilu tovanamilam. Amarle said, stam misachakim bekadur. Okay, and that's an example of how they normally, right, played this ball game. Kama, the ilate fe, mina nechale. Okay, in other words, the more they claim, the more power that they used of the thrower. Okay, that was more of the game. Right? La memra de kol hai gavna kochohu. That's our point. That here it seemed to imply that it was really based on the power of the ball thrower. Okay? But what happens? We're going to get a new challenge. Or minhei, says the Gemara. How about the following? You're saying that it's based on always on the direct force of the person. I'm going to bring you an example where there's a question about indirect force from a person. And here's the case. All right? We're talking in a moment about the sanctifying of the water with ashes based on the para aduma. Okay? So that's what we're going to see now in this story. Hamikadesh, one who is sanctifying this water by the ashes of the para aduma. V'nafal kiddush al yado. And some of the water, right, spilled, okay, and on his hand, right? Oh, al hatzad, or it spilled over, okay? V'achar kach nafal l'shuket, and afterwards this water fell into a basin or a gush of water or something like that, right? Okay, pasul. We say that water then is no longer valid. Okay, so it shows that even though it came out of the action of the person, okay, it isn't based on his direct action. Okay, right? Hacha b'mayas kinan. No, what are we talking about here, says the Gemara? Bishotate. No, the water was really only dripping. That's the point. Right. Right, the contents. It's water and ash together that have dripped. Okay? Tashma. Now we get to a new piece. Let's give the following. Okay, we have the following attempt, a second attempt at a challenge of direct action. Okay? We have a machat, a pin. Okay? Shahaya netuna al hacheres. And this particular pin is tameh. And it's sitting there on top of a piece of cheres, a piece of clay. Okay? So what happens? Vahaza aleha. Okay, and we're pouring water, okay, on this item. Okay, so what's happening? Safek al mamachat hazeh. There's a doubt, a question. Okay, where it pouring the water, is it going to pour and land directly on the pin that was tame, and therefore now render it tahor? Safek al hacheres hazeh, or there's a question of whether whether it lands on the piece of clay, the piece of okay, earthenware, and from there it spritz over onto the pin. Okay, that's the question. Umatse aleha chazaato, and it spreads off. In other words, it spritzes over onto the pin. What happens? Pasul, says the Gemara. In other words, it's no longer a question of direct force. Amar Rav Chinina, says Rav Chinina bar Yehuda Mishmei Rav. Okay, matzah. Okay, his answer is no. You have to correct it and say it was not. Okay, the what we cited. Okay, but it was matzah. It was found. Right? In case itmar. That's what should be said. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa. Let's take another example. Haiman, you had a certain person, dekafte lechavre. He again tied up, okay, his neighbor. Va'ashkale biyadcha demaya. And what did he do? He then put him, okay, into a okay, it could be on the seashore, could be he put him into the flow of water of a canal. Okay, remember we're talking Bavel, where they had canals for the, okay? So the gushing of water, all right? The gire didehu, that flowing of water, that he was put into the current, and the current would overflow on him. That is like, says the Gemara, his arrows. Geri didehu, umechayev. And we would find that person liable. Hani mili b'koach rishon, says the Gemara. No, we're going to say that is an example of a primary kind of activity. Okay? That's the point. Aval b'koach sheni, but when there is a secondary activity, okay? Remember we kept talking about direct or if it's indirect. Okay, if it's a secondary activity, and here's the word that you were asking about, Rebecca, grama ba'alma hu. Okay, it is basically an act of causation, secondary act. Okay, the grama, I'm not going to go into the whole discussion of what grama is. It's very important in terms of Shabbos. Okay, but this concept of grama has a lot of impact, as I said, particularly with halachas of Shabbos. Va'amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, zarak tzrua lamala. Let's take this example, says Rav Papa. Okay, if we're talking about direct act, and I take a stone, and I throw it directly at it, right? You shoot an arrow in the air, who can finish the sentence? And where it lands, I know not where. Okay? That's the, right? So what happens? Zarak tzror lamala, you throw a stone up, v'halacha, litztadin. And the law is that it's going to fall to the sides. V'harga. Right? And the halacha is that when it goes off to the sides, v'harga, and it kills somebody, chayav, you are therefore going to be held liable. Amar le mar bar Rav Ashi the Rav Papa. And so what happens? What does he say? We're going to roll over to the my Tama. What's the reasoning? Mishum de kochohu. If you're going to say that it's based on the direct action, the power of the individual, I kocho, if it's his energy, his action, tizola il, it should continue to go straight up. Okay? What happens? Ve'ilav, just the top of ayin chet, and if not, kochohu. Okay? It's still his agency, it's still his activity. Tazil tachash. And it's going to therefore go down. Okay? All right? And what? Yeah.
The question is, it's parabola. If the ball is going up, we say for the rock, it's his kaya. But when gravity takes over and it starts coming down, is that still his kaya? So the Gemara is saying, if he has no kaya yet in the ball, it would plummet straight down. The fact that it continues in the parabolic part is an indication that it's still his kaya.
Okay.
That's
Could be.
what he's saying.
Tazil tachat, it would fall down. Ela koach kehushu. That means that it is certainly less his direct activity and direct energy. Okay? And we'll stop right there and pick up tomorrow. I don't know.
The entire Archstrom is available for free on Android devices.
Really?
I'm using it. It's free.
I'm just surprised that it's the art scroll version.
It's
I mean, I know Safaria has Gemara.
There's a lot of Gemara available free, but I was blown away when I
Yes, yes. Let me just